Welcome to RPG Heroes, a podcast where every other week I speak to a true hero in the realm of role-playing games about their journey, their craft, and their views. As your host, I will focus on one particular aspect of this wonderful hobby for the interview, regale you with stories from my own 25 years of experience with role-playing games, and reflect on the major takeaways from the interview. Join me now on this epic journey and awaken the hero in you. Welcome to episode 8 of RPG Heroes, where we're going to delve into our main topic, play by post. And today we're going to be talking to Brendon, Faulkner and Noah Carr from the incredible Roanoke RPG play by post project. We also did a tour in their Discord server and I made a video of it. So there's going to be two really interesting first time things in this podcast. First of all, an interview with more than one person. And second of all, some video, which of course is not going to be part of this podcast because that's purely an audio product, but I will post that video up on my social media channels for you to enjoy. So that's really cool. But of course, first things first, I should thank a few people because the Patreon page that I have is growing. I have a couple of really cool new patrons to thank. First off, Thomas, thank you so much for rejoining. Then we have Stephen Potter, who became an epic patron. Thank you so much, Stephen. And then there is Eric Lundberg, who is actually from a podcast that I really enjoy called Omegaville. He also became an epic supporter of the show. So thank you, gentlemen, for your support. It is incredibly appreciated. And it helps to keep this show going. Because as I mentioned in episode 7, that's usually the turning point for a lot of podcasts. Either they keep going or they stop at that point. Well, the people supporting the show and also their very nice personal messages that they send me convince me to keep going. Another thing that really helps me to keep going is Twitter these days. So far I've found Twitter to be the social media platform that works the best for me when it comes to this podcast. I'm getting a lot of interaction, which I like a lot. And actually, thanks to Twitter, I was contacted by today's guest because at the end of episode 7, I wasn't that sure what the new topic of this episode was going to be. And luckily, he had a great suggestion for me. And, you're listening to it, so there we go. I'm also excited to tell you that we're now up to 910 downloads since I started in January. So we're nearing that magical 1,000, which is very exciting. Let's see how far we can take it with this episode. We have a lot of ground to cover, so let's dive straight in. So let's start off with what is play-by-post role-playing? Well, if you look it up on, for instance, Wikipedia, it will tell you that play-by-post role-playing games are an online text-based role-playing game in which players interact with each other and a predefined environment via text. That's the whole point of it. So unlike the more traditional Dungeons and Dragons or role-playing experience where you sit around a table and talk to each other, or nowadays, of course, in the current situation, you play online through platforms such as Roll20 using your webcam and a microphone and headset to still talk to each other and exchange ideas. In play-by-post, you use text. And this can be done in a number of ways, which I will cover in a moment. And it's a very different experience, I can tell you that. There are several different methods by which you could play play-by-post role-playing games. Actually, there are many. And the first one that I ever experienced was email. We had some friends in different countries and we decided, look, we want to play a role-playing game. And at the time, things like Roll20 or other virtual tabletops simply did not exist. And so we decided, let's use email. And we had an email chain going on in which we described what our characters would do and say. And then once a day, the dungeon master would respond to it all with what the environment did as a reaction to what we did. It worked, and it elicited quite a lot of very detailed and flowery language, which was nice. It was also a good exercise for all of our English, I have to say. And what's great about it, it gives you time to think about what would be the best course of action for your character, what fits your character, how could you describe it in an interesting way, because when you're going to send an email to the whole group saying how your warrior is going to dispatch this particular orc or this particular space alien, you want to make it something interesting to read. So rather than just typing, okay, I guess I'll shoot, and then you send it, you actually take a bit of time and think about the description of it. And that does actually help with a bit of immersion, I have to say. Another form of play-by-post that I have experienced is to use a forum. In this case, I got onto a forum called rpggeek.com, which is a forum about role-playing games. It's a very interesting forum. Go and check it out, I would say. The links, of course, in the show notes. And on this forum, I was looking for a way to play Call of Cthulhu, because I wanted to experience playing it before I would start running it. And I didn't really have the time for long sessions in any kind of virtual tabletop situation. So I figured maybe this is something that I could do on my commute. Send a few messages on the forum, respond by what my character would do, and then read everybody else's posts. And that actually was a wonderful way to spend the time on the train. I had a 1-hour commute each way, and that was just perfect. And the only downside was I was doing it on my phone, so it did mean that I had to zoom in and zoom out a lot to read properly and to be able to use all the text editing features of that forum. What I liked about the forum option is that it included a dice rolling option. So it did actually have some kind of mechanic for dice rolling, which our email thread did not have. So it was already a step up from that previous experience. And being able to roll the dice and also being able to use things like spoilers that you could hide, etc. Getting a persistent character sheet that you could look at and alter. All these things were definitely an improvement upon the email idea. The downside of all those options, though, was that I would spend maybe too much time trying to edit the posts that I was going to create in a kind of HTML type of environment. And then I would spend half an hour writing my response, and then by the time I sent it, 2 other people had already responded, and actually the story had progressed a bit. And this is, I think, a common issue with play-by-post, is you have to establish a really good rhythm of posts between all the players. And if you don't have that, if some people are more active than others or quicker to write everything, then you can get into that situation that I just mentioned, that you take your time with your post and suddenly, oops, it's not relevant anymore. And in fact, you just posted it and now the whole conversation is mixed up. So that's really a risk, something to look out for. And of course, there are solutions to this. Luckily, forum software, etc., is getting better and better, and it's becoming easier to get different colors of text and making things bold, etc., without going into HTML and learning how to use all those tags. So I think playing by forum nowadays would become quite a bit simpler than what I just described. Of course, the great advantage of a forum is that you can find games there and you can find players for your games. So it's also a meeting place for like-minded people who are interested in play-by-post. Whereas the email thread, there to go back to that one, was simply something amongst friends. I wouldn't know of any way to find people to do that with right now. Now, of course, more recently, we now see the advent of things like Facebook, where on Facebook, you, or any social media, I think, you could create some sort of group. So Facebook groups are a wonderful way to get a closed-off private environment where you can exchange posts. And the great thing about a social media site for play-by-post RPGs is that you get to show reactions to what people say, thumbs up, thumbs down, all that kind of stuff. You can include pictures, video, etc. It's really easy to create your posts and to keep an eye on them. And you can create different threads quite easily. Also, the privacy is assured by just making it a closed group. That way you can also connect to the players in a different way. So you can become friends on Facebook and perhaps even proper friends after a while. You could then use, for instance, Facebook Messenger, if you're on Facebook, to do little breakout sessions where nobody else needs to read what you exchange. You could even have phone calls nowadays and do a bit of voice in between to go for mixed media. I've also heard of people using WhatsApp groups for with a similar purpose in mind. So the idea is it's a much quicker, easier way to exchange messages really quickly. And if you have a group of like-minded people, you can create this group in WhatsApp very easily. The only thing about WhatsApp, of course, is that you can't really create separate threads for things, which is a downside. A platform for chatting that is way better for this, though, is Discord. And this particular platform is, I think, just perfect for play-by-post RPGs. These days are also bots that you can invite into your Discord server and that you can use to roll dice and do all these kinds of things. And you'll hear in a moment when I talk to Brendon and Noah, they use a bot that even has a link to D&D Beyond, so it can actually access your character sheet and allows you to make rolls straight from the sheet, which is incredibly handy. And it saves a lot of time, and it saves a lot of the hassle bits of playing by post, which is really wonderful. And so I was very curious about this. And the Roanoke RPG project is a play-by-post project that is now nearing its third season. And let's have a listen to see what Brendon and Noah can tell us about it. So, welcome to the show, Brendon Faulkner. He's the brain behind an RPG project of truly heroic proportions. It is called Roanoke, and during this interview, we'll find out what that is and why it's so exciting. Brendon is also a bit of a hero of this podcast, because he approached me to help me out with this episode's topic after hearing the end of episode 7. And if you haven't heard that, well, go and listen to it. For now, though, let's talk to Brendon. And joining us as well in the first duo interview for this podcast is Noah Carr, one of several dungeon masters for Roanoke, truly heroic to co-DM with several others for dozens of players. Right, welcome to the show, guys.
Hey, thank you so much for having us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Very excited to be on.
Excellent, cool. So let's start off with the main question that I think a lot of people will have when they start listening to this is, what is Roanoke?
And it's funny that you mentioned that because it's kind of hard to define. But essentially, it's what I have dubbed a role-play environment. In this case, it's one that's played out over the course of 5 weeks. It runs 24/7, so it's always on. It's played in real time, so like an hour rest, a short rest takes an actual hour. And it's largely play by post, but it does also have a voice event at the end of every week.
All right, that sounds really amazing. And how many players do you expect to have during this game?
Well, the first year was 30 that signed up, and about 16 were on every day. And the second year, 75 signed up with about 30. So it looks as though we tend to get kind of double the amount. And some people play for part of it. They'll play for a week. They'll play for a session. And some people will be kind of diehard and want to read every word that some people post. And that's a little bit of an inside joke because that's exactly what Noah did last year when he was a player.
Yep, I had no life and no responsibilities that kept me from being able to read all of it. My work was pretty relaxed in that way, and it was my greatest pastime, just being able to RP online, play by post with all these other people, going out in basically every bit of RP you can imagine in a D&D game, and that's everything that it comes to be. You get to see all the little dramas you find at a summer camp at the same time in this RP environment, plus all the D&D wonders of monsters and fighting and the mystery of Roanoke.
Another one of our DMs last night, DM Rob, actually said the same thing, that this is summer camp for nerds, right? Like this is 100%, like it's just weeks of being with your friends and having your own like little code code word world where you're making things up and it's all interpersonal drama, but it's also being done by adults who can kind of separate themselves from their lives. So it's a haven, I guess, is another way of describing it.
Yeah, and if you call it a summer camp, I suppose this year it's going to be the only summer camp that you can safely go to. So maybe
That's a
Yes.
really good point.
you might get thousands.
Oh man.
Yeah, imagine that. So how did all this get started? Because it sounds like a huge undertaking to create all this. What brought the idea to you when you first started this?
I have a real problem with saying no to players. When I first started out DMing, it was maybe 5 years ago. As far as like coming back into it, there was a little kind of break, a little gap in my life for Dungeons and Dragons in between 3.5 and 5th edition. But I knew that my wife and I needed to have like kind of a social circle. So on Mother's Day, I bought her all of the books. And then I decided that I wanted to have a game. So I went to a public game store and I talked to the manager, who actually now is one of my DMs. That's the DM Rob that I was talking about. And I said, hey, I want to run a game, kind of on the part of the store, and just whoever wants to play can play. I had a game where everybody was playing as city guards, and we didn't say no to people, to the point where I had 18 people at the mall, and I was sitting in the center of
18?
them. Yes,
Oh,
18 people in a public game.
wow.
There was 4 like cafeteria style tables in a diamond around me, and I was just talking as loud as I could to all of them.
Wow.
So it started with that, and then I moved on to well, I need an organization to kind of have my footing. So I went on to make something called Cascadia Gamers Alliance, which I have kind of since turned over to the folks who are currently running it. But that was a local game group. They have about 400 or so people now that have one shots once a month, and
Mm,
then they'll have like a social every once in a while that isn't actually D&D related. They just want to kind of get together.
yeah.
And so that organization kind of let me come to the point where if I wanted to have something bigger and kind of push the bounds with D&D, I had to come up with sort of a different format. And I had been using Discord in my home game in between sessions for a very intense, like, I had a 6-week limited run game
Mm,
where everybody in it were very good actors, and they enjoyed the RP side of things more than the crunch side of things.
yeah.
So it became fun. Everybody was using it all of the time to play as their characters during their short rest or their long rest, and like they're just talking to each other. And I realized that there was something to this that was just magical. So I took that idea and I made it an open game for 3 weeks, and we've kind of been progressing since then.
Mm,
I've been winging it. I've been flying by the seat of my pants
yeah.
up until this year, and now we're at the point where we're actually building tools where this could be like a thing that's repeatable.
Yeah.
But in the past, it was just kind of, if you build it, they will come, and when they came, they expected to have content.
Yeah.
So I started just cranking it out.
Oh, wow. And so in this first iteration of Roanoke,
Hmm.
were you on your own as a DM at the time, or did you already have help from others?
So Rob is my original partner in
Mhm.
all of this. He designed our first crafting system, because the game relies on trade and barter between players, so that they'll have to be cooperative once they get to the island.
Hmm.
The format of the game starts off in a different country, then you cross the Atlantic, and then you get to America, and then you spend 3 weeks in this colony. While you're there, you have to rely on one another to spend time crafting, I guess is the best way to put it. Maybe Noah, do you think you could save me and get my foot out of my mouth?
So the crafting system and was a huge undertaking that Rob originally designed, allowing these players, including myself. I was I was a player in both our season 1 and season 2. And it evolved in each one. And this play-by-post crafting system really thought of what roles would a colony take and how would they be able to balance that using the time of called crafting points, or how many days they're working on something, as well as gathering ingredients from other players.
Okay.
And this has evolved each year.
Yeah. So this is something completely new that's not in the Player's Handbook or Dungeon Master Guide. It's something you guys came up with.
Yeah, that's correct.
Very much so.
Wow, that's really cool. And I guess that really kickstarts a lot of communication between players that you don't necessarily need a DM for.
To the point where they're deciding to move in together and share their shops, and imagine these fantasy businesses growing and becoming like little communities amongst themselves.
That's
It was
really
really
cool.
amazing to see.
And so later on, I'm going to get a tour. But for now, I'm just curious how, I mean, you say move in, but then there is a specific room in the Discord server that you can claim as your own, or?
Yeah, everybody gets a shop. Everybody gets
Right.
their home, or you can share one with another player or a couple of other players.
Okay.
You get to really carve out your own space and
Yeah.
make it feel lived in.
Wow. Okay. So if I were to, as a player, if I were to just kind of wander around town in my head, in a sense, and I could think, I need some, I don't know, leather. I'll go to blah blah blah, and so I can actually then move myself to that particular room in the chat and see if the shopkeep is there.
Right.
Exactly like that.
Wow.
Which does a couple
Okay.
of things, right? On one hand, yeah, it gives them the community, but on the other hand, it also prevents me from having to design a shop,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
great.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh wow. Okay, that's very interesting. Um, It kind of reminds me a little bit of how some live action role play events can be, especially the larger ones, where,
Hmm.
of course, there is a main plot with the big bad guys, etc. But a lot
Right,
of the action in LARPs also revolves around player groups.
right.
At least I don't know how it is in the States, but here, if you go to the larger events in Germany, etc., that's mostly what happens. Huh. Okay, so it's kind of like a online LARP. Hmm.
In a
Very
way,
much.
like there's it's so hard to classify.
Yeah.
I don't know of really anything else that's done what we're doing before.
No, because that was going to
And
be one of my questions. Like, are there other play-by-post games like this? But so I guess
there
no.
are other play-by-post games.
Yeah, yeah.
Like for instance, I am familiar with one called the Blue Hoods,
Okay.
but their take on it is to essentially just have lists of games and DMs for all of those games, and then like you kind of rank up, and they take you to roll 20 for each of the games.
Oh, okay.
Whereas we're coming up with different solutions for how we're handling things like maps.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, curious about that as well. So, okay, how do you handle maps?
So this year, as opposed to previous years where we'd have usually a player who's very adept, shall we say, at MS Paint,
Uh-huh.
just drawing it. But this year, something I've designed that will be live when the game comes to fruition are two websites. And one of them is a DM companion guide. So it's a website where everything from NPC profiles to encounter tables and even our day-by-day script or guidelines. Uh, on the player companions, we'll have both the little bios of all the players and their descriptions of their buildings, as well as just general artwork of the Roanoke map or the map of the town. But uh, just a plugin using something as simple as Google Sheets, we're able to have an active battle map that we can just drag and drop our image onto and then make little tokens for our monsters or players.
Wow. All right. So, yeah. So it's definitely kind of evolving. If I hear this, so now we actually have live maps for the battle, because that's one of the things I was wondering about. I play D&D and other games through Roll20, uh, which I'm not affiliated with yet, but there's always hoping, right? But to take 100 people in there would drive me insane. So that wouldn't work for me. But so you're actually creating your own website to do this. Wow.
Yeah.
Hmm. That is just amazing. And are there any other things that are going to be different this time from the previous two seasons?
Oh man, so many things. Where to start?
I guess one like place to start would be in how we're planning out things.
Mhm.
The last year we as a player I was a player in last year's season, but Brendon here, he for about 2 weeks that were semi unplanned, they were just supposed to be a preview week for players to be able to just get online and begin role playing their characters, interacting with the environment. Brendon took it a step forward and began actually DMing that, but as everyone, it will take a toll. So this year we have a lot more help and are spacing it
Yeah.
out. So our DMs will be able to rotate, take some time off, so that they can come back for the content that they wrote or helped write. However, if one person needs to take a step out, we'll already have the scripts and what we need available to run the encounter just the same with anybody.
Yeah, that's definitely the biggest like quality of life improvement for our side of things. As far as the player experience goes, there's a lot of lore changes that have happened. We had originally set it with kind of a combination of Faerun and the real world. We've moved entirely to setting things in the real world now. It's a fantasy reimagining of it, but the map is the same. Um, the idea is generally that there's a divide between the old world and the new world, and people coming from the old world to the new world, in this case landing on the island of Roanoke, which has some really famous points in American history, um, is going to feel different for a few reasons. The not least of all is the method of travel. Last year we sailed on a boat. This year we've put enemies on top of the water that you have to avoid by taking a submarine across the Atlantic. So we have a little gnomish submarine kind of putting under the water and exploring all of the depths of the Atlantic.
That sounds amazing. All right.
Let's see.
Oh,
Anything else that you can think of, Noah, for big differences that we can talk
I'm
about?
One of the big difference is the next iteration of our crafting system. In that
Mhm.
point, we are still in discussion of what it'll look like in its finality. However, we have some large ideas of how it'll change from just anybody's able to just take all of their time or crafting points in the beginning of the week and spend them all to get the coolest gear right in the beginning. We want to try and aim for something a bit more realistic, in that an idea that we've been toying with is moving it towards each day is a slot of work that can be allocated towards crafting an item or something. That way, items will be completed either during or at the end of the week, uh, rather than, all right, it's week 2, just got all my crafting points. I'm going to make me some +3 full plate armor, which is something I definitely did in the last game.
Yeah, it's true. It was a little bit broken, but that's okay. We're learning from our mistakes. Another big thing that is going to be a big change is just the amount of material that's available to the players as far as what we're producing for PDFs. We're putting a bunch of the lore, I've designed a bunch of playable races. I don't even necessarily expect players to be playing the playable races, but they have the lore for that race kind of contained within the document. So that's going to be more accessible to the players before they start out. They'll know kind of more about what they're getting into, as well as there's just a bunch of quality of life changes that are being improved. I'm trying to filter in my head what is too spoilery to say, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of good surprises, and we've been doing a fairly decent job at keeping a lot of things secret.
Mhm. I think from a story aspect of one of the big things we're changing, besides just the overall story, the details of it will always change season to season. But this year, we've made it a thing to prepare for many more players, but still find a way to let them shine in the spotlight and whatever hero they want to put forward. However, in that, we also are preparing for a much more challenging environment that has many layers of complications, politics, as there are tribes on the island of other people or and native races. We have uh, new monsters that have evoke a darker sense of horror than we had the previous year. So there's many things coming together that will be new and surprising for all these players.
All right. Sounds great. And you mentioned some darkness, some horror. So is this a game primarily for, let's say, 18 and up, or?
It's I would definitely say no.
Hmm.
The way that we've handled that is a rule called fade to black. We tend to keep things um, very PG-13, and if there's going to be something either explicit or terrible that's going to happen, the player will just sort of code that in with the phrase fade to black. So Samwise Gamgee and Rosie Cotton go to bed and fade to black, right? Like, so we're
Yeah.
avoiding actually talking about sex while still allowing it to be in the game.
Yeah. And this is something you guys as DMs do. What about players amongst themselves? Because I read somewhere that last season people got married and all these kind of things, which I think is just incredible, really, really cool.
Yep.
But yeah, with marriage come other things that maybe not everybody wants to read about. How do you manage the community?
The fade to black rule was actually the community's invention.
Hmm.
So it's kind of come organically. We've all sort of decided that this is what we want out of the game. We want something that's accessible to younger players, but we also want something that where those topics don't have to be completely avoided.
Okay, that's really great because you know, lately on Twitter, if you follow anything related to RPGs, there's a lot of talk about feeling safe in a role playing environment and things like X cards, etc. So basically,
Right,
the fade to black is your X card in this
right.
particular game. Okay, that's great. That's good to hear that you've got something in place for that. Um, and well, I assume that people who join, they're not going to misbehave. But let's say somebody joins the game and he's not nice. Let's put it that way. What
Right.
is there a ban hammer and all that kind of stuff?
That's a topic that we talk about kind of at length between the DMs. We have had instances before where there's been a little bit of extra player shenanigans that maybe shouldn't have happened the way that they happened. But the thing to remember is that everybody's a person. It's not just a screen you're looking at. This isn't a video game. This is people relating to people. And for the most part, like, most people can kind of be talked through that. I even had a phone call with one of the players last year that I was struggling with, and we were able to, for the most part, I think, work things out.
Wow.
Um,
Hmm.
it's just a matter of kind of having some compassion and
Yeah.
having some patience, which can be hard when there's many people demanding your attention all of
Yeah.
the time.
I can
But
imagine. Yeah.
that's also why we're staffing up. That's why we're asking a couple of our players from before to be mods.
Hmm.
That's why we're taking the time to have these kinds of conversations now,
Yeah.
so that we can handle it appropriately when it happens.
Yeah, that's great. Really good. Yeah. And just when you mentioned player shenanigans, is there any player versus player stuff? Like, can I go and kill the blacksmith, or is that not okay?
with the DM present, like when I'm online,
Mhm.
I will allow some stuff if it's the rule is cool,
Yeah.
essentially, right?
Yeah.
If it's adding something to the story, or if it's
Mhm.
adding something to player interest, then some things like that can be arranged, but it's very heavily moderated.
Yeah.
I don't let people just wantonly grief one another.
No.
And if you start doing that, maybe a frog hemoth will come up out of the water and grab you and throw you across the village, which is what happened last year.
Oh, well, what a coincidence. I actually just used a frog hemoth in my last D&D game.
Oh,
Oh.
awesome!
I
Yeah,
think
it's a
my players are
fun
going to be like,
character.
what? They're in cahoots. All right. Wow. Okay. And so, of course, there's going to be all kinds of stories. And if I understand correctly, so the continuity is kind of ensured by the DM companion that Noah is creating, right?
Right.
Very much. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. And one thing I was wondering about, so a lot of role-playing games these days have become a spectator thing as well, huh? So streamed games, etc. Is there any way for people to learn about what's going on in the game by either watching, is it streamed or something, or are there going to be some kind of reports about it?
Well, not yet, but now that you suggested it, I'm going to bring it up to the DMs.
I know on our last season we did have a player role that was available called a spectator role, and it's a lot of reading either
Mhm.
way, but these spectators were able to have access to all the chats. However, they were not allowed to post in anything but out of character chats or social chats,
Yeah.
shall we say.
Okay.
And I I think it was used a little bit in the beginning by one spectator, but generally most of the people in the server were all about playing. So
Yeah.
not many heavy readers who just wanted to come in and watch.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it did a good job at pulling in people to want to play,
Hmm.
which is how I'll say we didn't have many spectators.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. And so it's a 5-week thing, right? Or six? Sorry, am I
It is
Right.
now 5 weeks
5 weeks?
It,
Yeah.
right.
officially.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And so let's say I'm not available for the first week, or I find out about it way too late because I'm not listening to this podcast. Then can I jump in halfway, or is that not possible?
Hey, man, there can always be a shipwreck on the side of the island,
Hmm.
right? There can always be somebody new who comes in.
Uh-huh.
The way the game is set up in such a way that there are secret societies that you can be belonging to, and the secret societies kind of encompass what your side quests are going to be throughout the time that you're on the island. So in that way, the game is already gated off. You're never going to be able to read everything that happens because some of it happens in private rooms. So with that said, the game, like because we're approaching it with a design philosophy of this game is like real life. You can't be everywhere at once. You can't possibly take in all of the information. Like if you were to sit in your apartment and think about what all of your neighbors are doing, you can't just walk into their houses all of the time and know what all of their business is. And
Yeah.
that's okay. It's okay to not be experiencing every part of the game. The game is still good, even if you come in 3 weeks late, even
Yeah.
if you come in, for just the last week. We had one character by the name of Palace who came in very late, but he ended up being one of the better actors and is well remembered amongst the core players.
Okay, that's great. And speaking of new, what about people who are new to D&D? Is this something for them, or is it more for seasoned players who want something extra?
100% for everybody who wants to come in. One of our players last year who actually
Oh,
ended,
Faywin.
yes, Faywin, she came in knowing just about what D&D was
Uh-huh.
and had never fully made a character, never played in a campaign,
Yeah.
and she, by the end of it, she fell in love, and I would say she is one of the most hyped players for our next season,
Wow.
having made her character months ago already, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And with that, I've also been making sure to invite everybody that I've met that is brand new and wanting to try something, because it really is a safe environment full of people. Everyone will be willing and wanting to help a new player get ready, make a character, learn what spells might fit their character the best, or what weapons or whatever they want, their backstory, and help them really uh, thrive and grow in this environment as a colonist of Roanoke.
Yeah, one of our like kind of prime uh, core values, I guess you'd say, as designers, actually comes from Kevin Smith, the movie director. He has a philosophy that talks about how everybody has a fundamental need to be heard, and I believe in that very much. I think that's why D&D has become like basically the world's oral storytelling tradition for our generation. And that is so perfectly encapsulating of what it is that I would like to accomplish with this project, is that everybody has a right to be heard, has a need to be heard, and this is a way to do that, that expresses your life and your feelings and your wants and your desires and your need for escapism, kind of all at the same time.
Wow, I love it. So anybody can join. All I really need is probably a player's handbook would probably be helpful to look up
Um,
things.
so a few of us have D&D Beyond accounts,
Hmm.
and D&D Beyond lets you share your campaigns to other players, and it lets you share the things that you have purchased. I'm using all of my accounts to give people the ability to have access to as much of 5e as they need to make any character they could possibly want. As well as one of our mods has offered his purchases as well. So right now we're set up to hold probably 70-ish characters. I might be able to come up with somebody else who's willing to donate their campaigns as well. So hopefully we'll have enough for everybody who wants one to have one. That also ties in with our bot, because I'm sure this is a question that's coming eventually, but how we handle things like dice rolling. We have a bot on the server called Avre that actually links to D&D Beyond, and you can roll using your stats just by typing in a quick command into Discord.
All right. And do you have so now finally the question kind of came back to me.
Sure.
So yeah, you're using the bot Avre. I've heard about it. I've not used it myself. I've used some other bot that I forgot the name of, Sidekick, I think, which I think is a lot simpler. But so Avre links into D&D Beyond. Um, so do you have any uh, partnerships with D&D Beyond or Wizards of the
No.
Coast in general?
No, we're not sponsored in any way, shape, or form.
Hmm.
We're doing our best to try to complete the game.
Yeah.
Any art that we have has been paid for out of pocket, which is why I set up a Patreon. Anything that we have is just going back into the game at this point. So unfortunately, we're not sponsored. We'd love to be. If
Hmm.
somebody is hearing this would like to sponsor us, hey, we're out here doing something cool.
Yeah,
Take notice.
absolutely. Yeah, and definitely something I think worthwhile of the attention of people like Wizards of the Coast. Um, and so that kind of brings me to another question that I had in mind, which is what's the dream here? What is season 5 or 10 going to be like? Like, do you have like a big vision of what you would like to do with this, or is it already
I
quite
mean,
an? Sorry, go
I've
ahead.
I've had, sorry, I don't mean to talk over you there. I apologize. Um, I've had a couple of ideas, but before I launch into that spiel, Noah, do you have ideas?
So, I I have many ideas. However, I am so excited for them. I want to be a player for it. So it's this fight. I love Brendon's ideas of exploring American folklore and these different things like the lost colony of Roanoke and some other things he's pitched before. And it's gonna be a real struggle of being whether or not I am a player for them so I can experience what he's going to create, or if I'm going to be on the development team to help really bring it up and make it accessible.
Thank you. No. Okay, so well, with that in mind, I recently came to the idea that this might be kind of infinitely scalable. And what I mean by that is that what we're making this year, I'm making templates essentially for how we create the game. It can get bigger, it can get smaller. I've had ideas like maybe doing this more often, but for shorter amounts of time. For 1 week sessions in a year could work, or something similar, maybe 2 week sessions.
Right.
Or this could be something that goes towards having multiple servers running at once. If the idea of having a big game is popular enough and people like that format. I don't know enough about what my audience wants in order to kind of make that decision right now. But the philosophical goal is to make this the most popular form of role play on the planet.
Okay.
That is what I want more than anything.
I love that ambition. That's great. And so I was just thinking while you were saying that, the multiple servers, like, would it be something to franchise? Like that I could say, for instance, oh, I want to do this style of game. I kind of buy into it, and then I get your template and I can run it, maybe doing a different kind of game like Cyberpunk or Call of Cthulhu or...
I think at this point, the way that I feel about it is that the product isn't complete enough yet to think about really franchising yet, right? Like I don't know fully what the end of this looks like, but I do know that it's special and that it's beautiful, and I want to keep doing it forever.
Yeah, I can totally imagine. In fact, that's something maybe for our listeners. Of course, I'm going to link to your website and your Facebook and also your Patreon page in the show notes. But just for people listening and getting kind of excited about this, when is this third season beginning?
July 18th. July 18th, and then it runs for 5 weeks until August 15th.
Okay. Because that happens to be in my summer holiday.
Oh, so, we would love to have you as a player.
Totally.
It's 850 hours long, which is essentially, I think I did the math, is something like 240 consecutive role plays, like 4-hour sessions. Like the average session is 4 hours, right? Yeah. So we're cramming 2.5 years worth of campaign into one campaign.
That is cool. Yeah. And since I'm a teacher, my summer holiday is nice and long. Okay. That is great. Yeah, I'm going to join. And so, and what I like about this is that it gives me the option of playing as much as I can or as I want. And if I log off for a while, that's okay. People sleep and rest and, just kind of...
Yeah, in fact, you have to, because that's when long rests occur. You don't get to heal up unless you take some time off the server.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So there's even the health code is kind of for gaming is also in there. Yeah, you don't spend 24 hours at your PC and then you
exhaustion is like your actual exhaustion.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So there's a lot of parallels with live action roleplay here, because there are quite a lot of live action roleplay events that go on for 24 hours, and they say, well, you need to sleep at some point, but game will continue, which would just drive me nuts, to be honest. But
it does drive some of our players nuts. Absolutely, that they can't be a part of all of it, and it probably is part of the reason that some of our retention for the players is about half the distance that the other players travel, essentially.
Yeah. And so you went from 30 in the first season to 75 in the second season to then 150 plus in season 3.
That would be amazing. If we have that many people sign up, I'm expecting half that number to stay the whole time. So we'll have like a floating number of about 75.
Wow.
Which I think with our staff now is definitely feasible.
Mhm.
It's a big responsibility. It's hard.
Yeah.
I've had many DMs before this drop out and say, hey, life's going on, and
Mhm.
that's okay. I understand that real life happens, and it definitely does take priority, and I give respect to those people who have those issues.
Yeah.
But it is also something amazing and worth sticking around for the whole thing for. There's multiple endings that you can influence depending on your choices on the island.
Yeah.
So it's definitely cool to kind of see that pay off.
Mm, excellent. And so how many dungeon masters do you have besides Noah?
There's myself, Noah. There's Ian, who's a brilliant artist and programmer. There's Rob, who is a longtime vet of D&D and Pathfinder, who is kind of our more analytical mind. He might not. He's kind of the he's kind of my Patronus. Like Rob is my spirit animal. Like when I need a good villain, that's when I pull Robin. He's
Oh, nice.
completely maniacal. He's our handsome Jack, if you're familiar with Borderlands parlance.
Yes. Cool. All right. Yeah. So that's okay. Yeah. For 75 people, that's they're going to be managing a lot, I think.
Sure.
Yeah.
And also we have two mods. We
Mhm.
have Jack, who played in last year. He's kind of a crowd favorite.
Mm.
He played a dwarf named Dragon, and he's been kind enough and generous enough to give me some of his time and said, yeah, hey, I'll help manage things like the player shops in week 1,
Yeah.
and he's helping produce a little bit of content, but he's not like being dropped into the huge world that we've built for the DMs.
Mhm.
We're gating the mods' resources off essentially, so
Yeah.
they can play the game as well as help.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've
Um,
been definitely creating censored versions of the script, so they get a taste of what's happening, so they have an idea that, all right, this description is going to be here at this time,
Yeah.
but they don't know all the fun that's going to be happening. So
Right.
they can have just as much fun as all the other players.
Okay.
and there's one last person that I'd like to talk about on our team, who
Sure.
is Reese. Reese lives in Australia. He was a player last year. He played a turtle named Clovis, who named all of his bees. It was fantastic. He was a druid that walked around, and every time he talked to a bee, he gave it a different name.
Oh, wow.
Um, he's helping us out, and he has kind of a critical role in this, in which he's going to be helping out with people who are on at different times than us, because the
Ah,
world has different time zones, and it can be very difficult to fill content when most of the mods are sleeping.
yeah.
So I'm still looking for people in other parts of the world to help out with this. I'm
Yeah.
looking for people who can be on and help moderate for their chunk of time zones, essentially.
Yeah. Well, roughly half my listenership is in Europe. So if you guys hear this and you're excited and you want to help out, contact Brendon, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'll put all his details in the show notes, and well, you can be a part of something, yeah, very interesting here. Okay. Yeah. So this whole episode is about play by post, and
Mhm.
so your game is kind of a mix of play by post plus some voice events, right? Um,
Correct.
what's your experience with play by post in general? Like, is there any cool websites that you would advise people to use, or is there um, a major difference that you think people should keep in mind if they want to play by post games?
Yeah, I've been talking for a while. Hey, Noah, why don't you start?
So I'm a bit worried about this question because my introduction into play by post was Roanoke season 1. That was the first time I had actually played D&D,
Hmm.
in where everything I say or do is in chat. In the first season, I actually was unavailable for all of the voice events, so my entire, I guess, Roanoke season 1 career and as a player was everything I did in play by post. As it went on, it was very interesting for me to see how, all right, these things will take a lot longer to do. Encounters that in game are like a minute max, maybe, will take an hour for everyone to type out everything they can, with like 7 players fighting this thing, which it was an adjustment, as I had just I was primarily used to being and I guess am the forever DM kind of person. So this was my chance to be a player somewhere, and it was interesting to compare it to a real life session or even online voice. And now, after playing Roanoke, I've taken bits of it in a couple of my own campaigns where that are played online. I have a chat or a couple rooms where it's just completely in character RP. If any players feel like they would need to get something done or would like just to chat in game when I'm not online or something. So it was quite an introduction to it, that is fun to see how to evolve and make things more manageable with 25 players or so in a single encounter.
Yeah, I can imagine. And so what's the, would you say, what's more challenging in play by post than in a face-to-face game?
Retconning.
Huh.
Retconning is the bane of my existence when it comes to this. If you feel that you've made a mistake, or that you would have known something different that would have informed your actions, and you kind of regret it,
Uh,
we don't really have much in place to go back. And the
mm.
reason is because other players will then say, oh, if he did that, I would also do something different, and it creates
Yeah.
this bottleneck.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's kind
Multiply
of,
that by 30 players.
yeah.
Yeah.
At minimum.
Yeah.
So that's kind of our hard and fast rule. It's really one of the only ones that we have in the game. Is, retconning is done only very sparingly and by DM discretion. And if you ask for it, you're likely to hear, "I'm sorry, what you say is what you did."
Yeah. The hand is off the chess piece kind of thing. Yeah.
Right.
Fair enough. Okay. Great. And is there anything that works actually better in play by post than in a face-to-face game?
RP interactions definitely work far, far better. The minutia of like having gone through a traumatic fight and then getting to unwind with your friends and discuss what happened,
Mm-hmm.
like those moments are where the heart of Roanoke sings. Like it is beyond anything else that I've ever seen, as far as evoking emotions from players, from getting them to engage not only with the story but also with each other.
Yeah.
Sitting at a table, a lot of times your focus is on the DM. We like to watch things like Critical Role because the players talk to each other,
Yeah.
and that's what's happening in Roanoke. Players are talking to each other, and everybody's acting like they are that character. It's the kind of the point of role play. If you're not like the hardcore crunchy 4th edition Pathfinder kind of person, it's going to be right up your alley.
Yeah. Okay.
I to add on to this, it really is the difference of like what makes a character a developed, well-rounded person. Almost, you really get to see everything that makes them real, quotations, in game, whereas in at a table you have that face to face. You're all like, all right, let's go to our next quest, let's do this.
Yeah.
And you might mention like, all right, I wind down at the bar or something, but here you see that you get to see all these friendships, rivalries develop, and it becomes, you get to see drama that you would see at a summer camp, going back to one of the first things we mentioned.
Yeah, and that makes sense, because when you're around the table with your friends, you have maybe 4 hours, and if you're lucky more, but sometimes less. And then you tend to gloss over a lot of the things that make for more personal interactions. Yeah, you're right. Interesting. So what I always ask all of my guests is, who are your role-playing game heroes? Who would like to go first?
I think I can for Roanoke Season 2, our second iteration of this RPG. I was a player named Venrir Gallahan, and this was a fallen Aasimar paladin who was coming to this new world to repent for lost mistakes and try to find themselves. They believed that to redeem themselves in the eye of their god, that they would have to either bring religion or refill a lost connection in this new world. And so coming over, he was put through many different trials. And through this, repairing both a rivalry and broken friendship with actually one of our mods characters, Dragon, which is funny how that turned out. But even coming and joining or rising up to be a pseudo leader of one of the secret societies, the Freemasons in our version of Roanoke, and even running an election and getting elected by the players of the town to be mayor,
Oh, wow.
and helping run or organize things. And with that, he also got to heal his connection with his god in a very grandiose way, where it was either his character died or he heals his connection right then and there. And that was a big choice that helped guide him along the rest of this adventure.
Okay. Wow. So this sounds like a really really great kind of arc for that character.
Very much so.
Yeah, and so that player did a lot, I suppose, to make that character very special and memorable. And what's kind of what would you say is the coolest thing that they did, like that really gave you that impression, like wow, this is an RPG hero.
So one thing that happened near the end of last season was we had a large fight with a prince of the devils, I believe, and who was masquerading as basically a cultist of one of the colonists, in some sense. But Brendon over here, as DM, decided to kill my god, uh, and or consume him and twist him into a form that was completely shattered and broken, and I lost all powers as a paladin. And actually, in that game, I had even helped lead another character to follow the same god, and they became a cleric of them. And they also lost all their powers to that god with it. And it was like the moment of critical despair. Nothing could be a lower point for this character. And it's like, what will he do next? Because the fight's not over, and their biggest fight to face this, known as the Croatoan, but saying his name gives him power until we defeated him. But his next days were spent twisting and changing his character and realizing that with no god left, there's nothing that could replace his god. There's no other god that would make sense for him. It wouldn't provide the same amount of hope to him or same calmness in his wisdom. So he, as paladins can, they don't always have to choose a god. He made not a pact, but an oath in front of all the gods to still fight for what his god had believed in. And in that, he gained back his power and his abilities through his own conviction, to stand up and lead this group of colonists against this the Croatoan.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. I'm actually getting goosebumps. It's a shame this is a pure audio experience, but look. Oh wow. Okay. And what about you, Brendon? Who is your RPG hero?
I'm going to take this conversation kind of in a different direction. I'm gonna take you guys back to December 1973, back at Gen Con, one of the first Gen Cons. Gary Gygax met a gentleman by the name of Brian Bloom at that con, and Gary Gygax had not yet presented the world with Dungeons and Dragons, because he was like he and his partner had each put up like $1,000 to try to make it, but they were still short by half. And Brian Bloom showed up and was kind of an angel investor and a partner to Gary Gygax. And if he hadn't shown up with his $2,000 that he had in his pocket, said, "Heck yes, I want to make this a thing," we wouldn't have D&D today. Unfortunately, recently Brian Bloom passed away, and that was just last month. And like, there's just not enough conversation in the world kind of celebrating this guy and what he did to make D&D be a thing. Like I'm a little emotional about it, because like that's where I'm at right now, right? Like that's the place where I'm trying to get my product up. And not really even like a product, but my piece of art. I would like to present it to the world. And like that's the kind of relationship that gives me hope, is that there's people like that who can look at a game and just give it what it needs to move on.
Yeah. Wow.
That plus there's another gentleman. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to give you two. I apologize. The other person is somebody who's been a mentor to me through all of this. He's somebody who already kind of has some success in the D&D world. A gentleman by the name of Chris Hunt. Chris Hunt runs something called Shipworks. They make model terrain. He's doing boats for D&D that are scale model to minis. That can be printed out with 3D printers. So he sells the files, and then you can print your own amazing, just absolutely gorgeous, beautiful ship for your campaign. So if you're doing any kind of water-based D&D right now, like if you're doing any kind of nautical or sailing thing, and you want an amazing piece that is not super expensive, right? Like if you want to make all of your own pieces, it's I think 3D printers are down to like $250 right now. Like, yeah, that's a gate for some people, but for other people, it's starting to open up and make minis be possible and not cost thousands of dollars to amass a collection. And man, Chris sends me pictures of what he's working on every like 2 or 3 days, I'd say. Sometimes we go a little bit longer without talking, but for the most part, like he is who I can talk to when I'm having problems with Roanoke. He's who I can kind of keep my head in the right space as far as, hey, this is valuable, this is something worth working on. Keep doing it. He's been there to back me up, but he's also got a successful Kickstarter where he's already kind of accomplished it. He has a great Etsy, and he's, doing things for D&D that's pushing the bounds, which is kind of a kindred spirit to me, that I feel like we're kind of both pushing the game to be something better for everybody.
That's excellent. Great. And I'll be sure to link to his Kickstarter and his Etsy, etc. in the show notes.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
No, of course. Wow. So 3 really great RPG heroes. Thank you guys so much, and thank you very much for this this extensive interview, the very first duo interview for this particular show. And well, I have to say, thanks to you guys, I think it worked out quite well. Well, that was the first duo interview, and I enjoyed it a lot. I hope you did too. And I'm pretty sure you can tell I got very excited about this Roanoke RPG. And, well, if I can make the time for it, I will join. And hopefully some of you will too. I certainly became very, very enthusiastic after all that they told me. And what I noticed, what really struck me in this particular interview, is how emotionally invested Brendon and Noah are in this particular project, and you can tell, especially with Brendon, that it's really his baby, and that is exactly what you need to make something like this actually work. There are so many cool ideas out there, but if you don't truly care about it and put all your energy and effort into it, chances are it's not going to become anything very exciting. And like I said, this Roanoke RPG is something that is very exciting, and I think something innovative. And this is, again, a great example of why certain people are RPG heroes in my mind. Because they come up with something cool that I certainly couldn't come up with, and they have the energy and the tenacity to make it work. It also goes to show that role-playing games are very, very much about the community. And on a very small scale, your role-playing group, it could even just be a few people, that is a very small community all of its own, with its own unwritten rules and sometimes written rules, with its own ups and downs, but also with a very strong connection. I truly believe that role-playing games connect people in a way that not many other hobbies can. And, when you start looking at the bigger picture, such as with this project, or with a large play-by-post game in general, you see that more and more people feel connected to it and to the story, and start contributing in more ways than just consuming the game, which I think is just a wonderful aspect of this. And you can see now that, for instance, Noah, he turned from a player into Dungeon Master for the next season. So, conclusion, if you're stuck for a game to play because of all this horrible stuff going on, or simply because you don't have a group, or maybe you're socially a bit awkward and you find it difficult to approach people to play, then Play by Post could be a wonderful way to get you into the hobby, or to get you back into the hobby, or to get you playing more than you normally would. So give it a go, whichever way you want to do it. Discord is certainly one option for you. Well, that's it for episode 8. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed recording. If you did, please consider leaving a 5-star review on iTunes. It really helps to get the podcast get heard. Want to keep up with the latest news about my podcast? Then hop on over to Twitter at RPGHeroes1. Check out the full show notes with all the links at rpgheroes.buzzsprout.com. Want to support the show and join other supporters on my Discord channel? Then I would be honored if you check out my completely renewed Patreon page at patreon.com/rpgheroes. 2 weeks from now, we'll be talking about narrative role-playing games with the help of John Harper, creator of Blades in the Dark. Until next time, stay heroic.